the wicked king and his bride. Long, long ago there lived in the Holy Land an old peasant and his wife. They had an only son who was also married. The family all lived happily together in a little house, in a village near Samaria. The son, whose name was Chanina, was a very good man, deeply learned in the Holy Scriptures and the ancient law of Israel. In course of time, the old father, feeling his end drawing near, called his beloved son to his bedside and said to him, "Hearken, my son, to the words which I am about to speak. Your mother and I will soon die. After our death and burial, you will observe the customary period of mourning and lamentation. On the day following, go to the nearest marketplace and buy the first thing offered to you, be the price what it may. I also charge you to continue the study of the holy word of the Bible, by day and by night. Keep the divine commandments, support the poor, and be kind to the dumb creatures." After he had spoken these words, he blessed his son and closed his eyes in the sleep of death. Chanina went to tell his mother of the death of his father. The sad news was too much for the poor woman, and the shock killed her instantly. The pious son buried his beloved parents in the village cemetery, and returned home to keep the customary period of mourning and lamentation, which lasted 7 days. Manful of his father's dying words, Chanina went on the following morning to the nearest marketplace. One of the merchants, carrying a beautiful silver casket in his hands, came to him and said, "Will you buy this casket?" "What is the price?" asked Chanina. "I will take 80 pieces of silver for it," answered the merchant, and he added, "I will not accept any less." Chanina agreed, and there and then paid the large sum of money demanded, thinking all the while of his dear father's last wish. The money which he had spent in buying the casket was nearly all the fortune he possessed. Without any further delay, he returned home with his purchase, which he was anxious to show to his wife. "Look here," he cried, "I have spent nearly all our money in buying this casket, even as dear father told me to do just before he died." "Open it," said his wife, "there is sure to be something very valuable inside it." He lifted the lid of the casket and was astonished to find that it contained another silver box. He took this out and opened it, curious to learn what was inside. To their great surprise, a little green frog leapt out. "Well, I never!" cried Chanina. "This is an expensive creature." "Do not forget," his wife said, "your father's command to be kind to the dumb creatures." "Quite right," says her husband. "We will provide for the frog even as though the little fellow were one of us." The frog grew larger and larger, and the silver box was no longer large enough for its quarters. Chanina therefore made a nice roomy cupboard for their new friend's abode. After a while the wife told her husband that there was no more money left to buy food. With a very sad heart the good man called the frog to his side and said, "I am awfully sorry to tell you, dear little friend, that we cannot feed you any longer because we have no food left even for ourselves." "Please don't worry," cried the frog. I hope you will believe me when I tell you that I am indeed more than grateful to you, both for all your kindness and hospitality. Let me prove my gratitude by giving you this piece of advice. In the box where you found me, you will see a strip of parchment. If you place it in the fold of your turban, you will be able to understand not only the different languages of mankind, but also the speech of birds, fish, and beasts. Chanina did exactly as the frog told him, and calling his wife, told her that they would accompany the frog to his new home wherever it might be. The frog said this should be in a pond in the wood nearby. They all went to the wood feeling sad that poverty was forcing them to part company. As soon as they came to the wood, the frog told them to rest themselves. Then at the bidding of the frog, the birds and beasts in the wood brought to Chanana and his wife an immense quantity of valuable gems and an assortment of roots and herbs. The kind-hearted frog gave these gifts to his good friends, explaining how the herbs and roots were to be used for healing purposes. Then at last the frog bids his friends farewell and tells them that he was really a son of Adam and the demon Lilith, and that he had the power of changing himself into any shape. Chanana and his wife gathered up the precious gems, roots and herbs, and returned home. On the way they met a caravan and offered some of the gems for sale. A good bargain was struck, and Chanana and his wife found themselves with plenty of money. They left their old home and bought a nice house. Riches did not spoil them, for their hearts were kind. Moreover, Chanana kept faithfully the charge of his beloved father. He studied the holy words of Scripture by day and by night, and observed the divine precepts with a good will. Their home was always open to the poor. The good fortune of Chanana spread far and wide. His reputation as a charitable man reached the ears of the king, who invited him to visit his court. The king took a great fancy to Chanana and persuaded him to take up his abode in the palace. The king was by no means a pious man. In fact, he was very wicked and cruel. He was unmarried, and this fact alone displeased his subjects. His counselors urged him to find a good wife, saying to him, "Let us, O king, remind you that we require not only a king but also a queen and little princes. For there will surely come a time when a new king will have to be found, because kings and queens are mortals and they cannot live forever." They did not tell the king what their real motive was in advising him to marry. They thought that if the king were to find a true and good wife, it might be possible for her to use her influence and make him a better man. The king dismissed his counselors, promising to see them again in a week's time, when he would tell them whether he would marry or not. When they came to the palace at the appointed time, the king's valet met them and told them that his majesty would receive them in the palace garden. They went there and found the king sitting on his throne. As they approached, he rose up and bade them welcome. At that moment, a beautiful bird flew over the king and dropped a long golden hair upon his shoulder. The king took the hair in his hand and, turning to his counselors, said, "I will marry only the maiden to whom this golden hair belongs." No other wife shall be mine. You wish me to marry well and good, so be it. I now command you to discover the owner of this golden hair, and mark you, if you do not bring her to me within a year from today, I will have you and all your families put to death. The counselors were greatly distressed at the turn of events. They feared that their lives would be forfeit. How were they to find the lady whose golden hair had brought misfortune to them and their families? With sad hearts they left the royal presence, and when they were outside the palace, they asked one another, "What is to be done?" Chanina, who was now one of the king's counselors, offered to find the lady destined to be their queen. He hastened home to bid his wife farewell and to prepare for his journey. He took a bag into which he put 6 loaves, a small assortment of his precious herbs and roots, and 12 silver coins. Having blessed his wife, he set out on his quest. He walked during the best part of the day, and at sunset, feeling very tired, he sat down on a large stone beneath a tree. He was just about to doze off when he was suddenly startled by hearing a raven's croak. He listened and understood that the bird had not found any food for 3 days. He at once opened his bag and gave the raven a large piece of bread. On the morrow Chanina met a dog howling miserably. "Come and tell me," he said to the dog, "all your troubles. I understand the speech of beasts and birds." The dog said that he was very ill and hungry, for it was just a week since he had eaten any food. Chanina gave him one of the healing roots and a loaf of bread. The dog devoured the bread and ate the root and thanked his good friend. Next day Chanina came to a river and found some fishermen trying in vain to pull in their net, which contained a large fish. The fishermen pulled so hard that they feared their net would break. Chanina lent them a willing hand, and then they were able to pull in the net. The fishermen shouted with joy, "We have enough now for dinner today and tomorrow." Chanina asked them to sell the fish, and he would give them 12 pieces of silver as its price. They agreed and gave him the fish as soon as he had paid them. They could hardly believe their eyes when they saw Chanina throwing the fish back into the river. Bidding them farewell, he continued his journey. At last he came to a large town where, unknown to him, dwelt the maiden whom he was seeking. She was a princess, the only daughter of the king of that country. Chanina came to the courtyard of the palace and stood still a while gazing around. The princess was looking out of the window of her room and saw Chanina, whose strange attire attracted her attention. She sends her chamberlain to bring him to her presence. In reply to her inquiry as to the why and wherefore of his visit to her father's land, Chanina tells her the story of his quest. Looking at her, he sees that she is the very lady whom he has to find to be the wife of the king, his master, for her tresses were golden, even like the hue of the hair which the king found upon his shoulder. "Come, good lady, with me," he cries, "and save my people, the wise men of Israel and their families, who are in mortal danger. Come and be queen in our land and save the soul of our lord the king." The princess had listened very attentively to all the strange story told by Chanina, and in reply she said, "Well do I remember drying my hair one day last month in the garden of our palace, and whilst doing so a strange bird flew over my head 3 times and then plucked out one of my hairs. He flew away with the hair, and I can now believe that this is the very bird which brought my hair to the king of your land. I will accede to your wish and consent to become the queen of your land if you fulfill 2 tasks which I will set you. The first I will mention at once. Here I have 2 empty flasks. You must bring them back to me full of water. I do not mean the water of the brook or well, but the one flask must contain water from paradise, and the other must be filled with water from hell. When you have done this task, I will tell you all about the second one." With a kind word of farewell, the princess dismissed Chanina. He left the palace with a sad heart and prayed to God to help him in his difficulty. Was he not trying to save the lives of his brethren in the Holy Land? After a little while he hears the croak of a raven speaking as follows: "Dear friend, do you no longer remember me? Did you not give me bread when you met me? I was so hungry then, for I had not tasted any food for 3 days. Now just tell me, how can I be of service? I will gladly do my best to please you." Chanina told the raven all about the task which the princess had set him to do. "Here are the flasks," he said. "One must be filled with water from paradise, and the other must be filled with water from hell." The raven told him to tie a flask to each wing, and at sunset to be at the spot where they were conversing. The raven flew to the netherworld and singed his wings in passing through the flames of hell. At last he reached the black boiling waters in the center of hell and filled one flask. He then flew to the gates of paradise and found the spring, which flows from its midst, and bathed in its cool water to heal his wings. He then filled the other flask and flew to the spot where he had arranged to meet his friend. He gave the flasks filled with the desired water to Chanina, who returned to the palace and told the princess that the task was done. The princess was in doubt whether the water of each flask was genuine. She proposed to test the contents there and then. Opening the flask containing the water from hell, she poured a few drops upon the palm of her hand. The water burnt her skin, and she quickly put some of the water of the other flask upon the burnt spot and healed it at once. She told Chanina that she was quite satisfied with this performance. "But now," she said, "you have to perform a much more difficult task. Just listen. Some years ago I was playing with my ring in a boat, and by accident I dropped it into the water. It was a golden ring with my initials engraved on the gold and set with a beautiful pearl. Restore this ring, and when I have it again, I will comply with your request." The princess thought that it would be impossible to find her ring, and that she would not be bothered to accede to the wish of Chanina. She again dismissed him with a few kind words and told him not to be disappointed if he failed to find the ring. Chanina at once turned his thoughts to God and prayed for divine help. He then went to the nearest river, hoping that his good fortune would not forsake him. As soon as he came to the water, he beheld the large fish which he had purchased and thrown back into the river. "Tell me," said the fish, "what you desire, and I will try to help you." Chanina told the fish the story of the ring of the princess, and said that he must have this ring as soon as possible. "Meet me at yonder bridge," said the fish, "tomorrow morning at daybreak, and I will bring you news concerning the ring." The fish then swam away and made for the bottom of the great sea, in order to seek the help of Leviathan, the monster king of the deep. Leviathan welcomed the fish, and having heard his story promised to help him. He issued an order throughout his vast kingdom, compelling every fish to report to him if any such ring had been heard of or discovered. If he should discover that a fish had the ring and failed to produce it, very severe penalties were sure to follow. Within an hour the ring was brought to the palace of Leviathan and placed before his throne. Leviathan then gave it to the fish which had promised to help Chanina. Next morning at daybreak the fish delivered the ring to Chanina, who rejoiced greatly at the cleverness of the fish. How glad he was that he had fulfilled his dear father's wishes in being kind to birds, beasts, and fish. At noon Chanina entered the palace and was brought at once to the princess. Behold, he cried in a joyful voice, "Your Royal Highness, is this not your ring? Your initials are engraved on the gold." The princess admitted that this was her ring, and as the two tasks which she had imposed had been satisfactorily accomplished, she now consented to accompany Chanina to the Holy Land. On the way they were attacked by robbers. Chanina, fearing that he would be overpowered, called for help. At that moment a dog ran up to his side and barked so furiously that the robbers made off. The dog was glad to repay Chanina for having fed him and healed him in days gone by. At last they came to the Holy Land, and when the king saw the beautiful princess with the golden hair, he was very happy. Amidst general rejoicing, the royal wedding took place. The king rewarded Chanina by making him his chief counselor of state. The good man's success, however, was marred by a great misfortune which had befallen him during his absence. His good wife had died. Moreover, some of the royal servants were envious of his advancement in the king's favor. They resolved to hire some ruffians who were to waylay him. One day, as he was leaving the palace, the ruffians attacked him and killed him in the courtyard. As soon as the news of the sad event was told to the queen, she cried, "Never mind, let me see what can be done." She went to her cabinet and took out the flask containing the water from paradise. She then went to the courtyard where the king and nobles were gathered around the corpse. "Make way for Her Majesty the Queen," the people cried. When the queen saw the dead body of her friend, she smiled. All eyes were fixed on her. She sprinkled some of the precious water upon the corpse, and immediately Chanina opened his eyes and arose. Now the people understood why the queen had smiled. "Come now," said the king to his wife. "Kill me and restore me to life again. I should just like to know how it feels to be dead." The queen declined to murder her husband, and turning to him she cried, "Do not be so wicked. Life is sacred. Moreover, the wonderful water will only bring a person back to life provided his life had been good. Your Majesty," she added, "must repent and mend your ways, otherwise you will not be restored to life in the hereafter." The king went away in anger and returned to his royal apartments. Here he ordered one of his servants to kill him. "If you refuse," cried the wicked king, "I will instantly kill you." Whereupon the servant obeyed the king and slew him. The queen was at once informed of the wicked death of the king. She was truly sorry to find that he had not allowed himself to be influenced by her advice, but that he had trifled with his life. She therefore fetched the flask containing water from hell. Then she sprinkled its contents upon the body of the wicked king. His body immediately was burnt to ashes. She thereupon turned to the astonished members of the court who were looking on, and in a gentle voice she said, "Do you not see, good friends, that if my husband had been a good and holy man, he would have been restored to life, just like Chanina? But the fact is that he was a cruel and bad man. You all knew this even before I came here from my father's land." After the burial of the king, the councillors came to the queen and urged her to marry Chanina, who had proved such a trusty friend. The suggestion pleased the queen, who gladly gave her heart and hand to the good man. They ruled the people in justice and kindness, and as long as they reigned there was peace in the land.